Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the response. It's one of the last sessions of the conference, so thank you very much for coming along today. My name is James Senior, and I'm the technical evangelist at Microsoft on the web platform. And I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague, Vittorio Bertocci, who is a senior architect evangelist also at Microsoft. Today we've got a session of two halves, really. That's why we've got two presenters. We're going to be doing a session on, first of all, Web Matrix, which is our new tool for building websites and web applications. And I'm going to be talking about that for about 20 minutes and showing you some cool demos. And then Vittorio is going to talk about our past story with Windows Azure and some of the work we've been doing with PayPal in that particular arena. So that's how we're going to structure the session. We're going to leave questions till the end because we're kind of a little bit short on time because we're trying to cram in a lot of good stuff. So if you would like to ask any questions, we're going to have those at the end, and we're going to be hanging around outside in the corridor if we are shepherded out at the end. So just to start off with, we always like to kind of paint the picture and the vision for Microsoft and its developer platform. So traditionally, Microsoft is a software company that has a strong offering in the on-premise servers and applications world. And in recent years, we've been evolving the company into this new kind of exciting cloud area. And so where we're at right now is reaching a point of symmetry between the offerings we had on-premise, things like Windows Server, SQL Server, SharePoint Server, and many, many more products like that, and then offering a symmetry in the cloud. So you have now a place to run and land applications just like you would in the old days in on-premise land, but now in a more scalable infrastructure in the cloud. All of these programming models and applications and servers that you're targeting have a common theme, and that is .NET. So the one language to program against all of these things successfully in transfer of skill and knowledge and all that kind of good stuff revolves around .NET and that middle layer there. So we have the likes of Windows Office, Internet Explorer, Silverlight as all the clients, and those emerge into various types of devices out there, as you well know. Things like PC, the upcoming Windows Phone 7, which has been getting a lot of good press, as well as the web. So as you program your applications and land them in the cloud, think about how you can leverage all of those different clients using the same programming model and techniques and skills to reach as many people for your applications as possible. And then on the right-hand side there, we have a collection of tools which are very powerful ways to build applications on all of these platforms and for all of these clients using the same knowledge, the same skills again. So we have Visual Studio, which is our professional developer IDE. We have Expression Studio, which is for creating design work and web-based websites. And then we also have the new offering, which I'm going to talk to you about today, just called Web Matrix. So let's move on to Web Matrix now. We've kind of discussed the entire platform. Web Matrix is currently in beta 2. We have a plan to release another beta before we go RTM in the new year. And we came to this product and this new way of programming because of some market research we did amongst web developers. So if you think of Visual Studio as the tool of choice for professional web developers who demand things like a testing framework, things like source control, version control, and all of those kind of more advanced tools, then we had a gap in the market when it came to a tool that addressed people who just wanted to build a website and ship it, and who were in the business of cranking out websites and web applications for customers, hundreds a year, but just kind of having a cookie-cutter approach to getting a solution out there and charging $1,000 to $10,000 for it. So in that kind of non-professional kind of arena. So Web Matrix really came out of a couple of areas of research, and we found that when we talked to a lot of web developers who were doing this model, they had two approaches. The first approach was building something from scratch. And we're talking about building on some foundations here. Obviously, you have the likes of a web server, database server, a framework that you can build your applications in, but basically starting from that very low level and going on from there. So that was an approach that a lot of people still like to do today. And then something we're seeing as more and more popular is actually building from a web application. So if you think of the likes of Joomla, Drupal, Umbraco, WordPress, all of those are web applications that get you about 80% of the way to your solution. And they're very effective in terms of acquiring the application, customizing and tweaking it for your customer, and then shipping it. So it's quite a good way of getting something out there and being able to have a repeatable process around it. So we wanted to provide a couple of ways with this new tool for people to build applications. Now, I should point out that there is no right way to do this, but we wanted to provide the approach very easily in one tool so people could go ahead and achieve the same results. Now, a couple of years ago, we launched a tool called Web Platform Installer. Has anybody heard of the Web Platform Installer, or WebPI as its code name? A few hands there. Cool. So this is an installer that is very lightweight and allows you to grab not only the Microsoft Web Platform, so ASP.NET, IIS, SQL Server Express, and basically your development environment, but it also allows you to bring down applications as well. And the cool thing about it is that it managed all of the dependencies between those applications. So if you think about setting up WordPress on your dev box, you have to have a number of things installed: PHP, MySQL. Make sure all those things are working. And sometimes getting that all set up and running on your dev box was somewhat of a challenge. The beauty of WebPI is that it allowed you to just with one click install all the prerequisites and then get going very quickly with creating your websites. Similarly for ASP.NET based web applications as too, like Umbraco and .NET Nuke and Kentico. So lots of people like this tool because it gets them started very quickly on their dev box. And in the last couple of years, we've actually had a large number of downloads. So we've had 2.5 million web apps downloaded from the WebPI so far. So that's a huge number, and we're helping to kind of foster the ecosystem around the free web applications with the WebPI. But one thing we noticed with the WebPI, it provided a great way to download stuff, but once you'd done that, you were pretty much on your own in terms of writing applications, customizing applications, etc. So what we've done with WebMatrix is actually provide the WebPI infrastructure inside the tool and the way of acquiring applications and framework, as well as a rich editor to customize and then publish your applications. So WebMatrix in itself is a tool that supports both models. So remember, we have the approach which is starting from scratch, and we have the approach which is building from a web application. It makes those things very easy to do. It includes not only a tool, but a database server, which is actually file-based. And that has some benefits because it means you can just use a file and then copy and paste it into other projects or chuck it in an email and send it across to another dev. It's very portable and lightweight. The web server itself, again, is completely redesigned and very lightweight in its nature. And then the framework that we ship with the tool is an abstraction on top of ASP.NET that really simplifies the programming model and makes it very easy to code. So we'll take a look at these different aspects and these different elements in more detail in a demo. So in terms of what's under the hood, the framework itself uses a new syntax, a new code syntax called Razor. And I like to think of it as kind of one of the key selling points of WebMatrix. It's a very, very elegant way of coding your web applications. It allows you to do inline code, similar to, if you cast your minds back to classic ASP and PHP, that approach to development. It allows you to mix code and markup very easily and transition between the two pretty seamlessly. And there's also a big library of helpers. These helpers are basically code shortcuts which simplify getting common functionality achieved in your applications very quickly. On the storage side, we've got SQL Compact Edition, which I've mentioned. It's file-based SQL Server, and it's easy to deploy. And there's no dedicated server required, either on a dev box or when you push it out to production, which is a great benefit from a cost perspective. And then from the deployment side, we've got a new publishing model which we've incorporated into WebMatrix, which makes it really, really easy to upload your sites once they're complete. And it's kind of clever because not only does it upload the first time, but then if you make small changes, it'll actually notice that you've just made a change and upload that instead of the whole site from scratch. So it's quite useful and clever like that too. So I mentioned these helpers. Today we're really pleased to announce that we've been working with PayPal to produce a helper that will work in WebMatrix. that makes it really easy to create websites that have PayPal integration. And we've done that in a number of areas. First of all, the Adaptive Payment API, and secondly, the Button Manager API. And we're releasing this in beta, and I'll be showing you some examples of how to use this. I've just literally blogged about the new the helper and where to get it, and also provided some samples that you can get started with. And we'll also be in the future creating some templates that make it easier to get started and provide some examples of how to use the APIs as well. So let's have a quick look at Web Matrix. We're going to do a few things. We're first of all going to look at how you build an application from scratch. We're going to look at how to build an application from a web application, the open source applications I mentioned before, and then we'll take a quick look at the publishing process itself. So let's open up Web Matrix. This is a free download. Get it from microsoft.com/web/webmatrix. And this is the splash screen. And it's organized into those two approaches that I mentioned before. First of all, we have the option to create a site from the web gallery. Now, the web gallery is basically a collection of all of these open source applications that are very, very popular out there on the internet. So we see, excuse me, we've got a number of these which should be familiar: .NET Nuke, WordPress, not Commerce. This is one which is most applicable to you guys today because it actually provides the ability to create a store, an online store with PayPal integration very quickly. So what will happen is if I install Not Commerce, then I'll get the option to download it. And you'll see it's not actually coming from a Microsoft site here. It's coming from an open source project on codeplex.com. So we don't have any control over the code. It's actually coming from the community. So with one click, I can accept that agreement, the EULA, and then it'll go ahead and install. It'll install all of the platform requirements, the server, the components that are required on the server, and then also set it up for me ready to go. I'm not going to show you that particular application today, but it's just worth pointing out that there's a lot of rich applications here that will get you 80% of the way to a solution for your customer, and then all you have to do is customize it, tweak it in Web Matrix, and then publish it out. What I'm going to show you today is creating a site from template. Now, these templates are great for learning about Web Matrix. They provide maybe 5 to 10% of the functionality that you're going to need in a real site. But because it's a new syntax and it's new technology, it's great to learn the approach and kind of the best practices using some of these templates. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a bakery site. This is our typical store. An example of how to create a store. And then we land on the home page here for this particular site. Now you'll see that we've arranged things in a certain way. We've got the ability to browse files in our site. We've got the ability to manage the database. And we can also run reports as well. Now these reports are actually pretty cool. They're to do with SEO. Now before you publish your site, you probably want to give it a once over with the SEO tool here to make sure that it's optimized for Google and Bing and the other search engines to make sure you get good SEO juice when you publish it out there. Secondly, the database side of things provides you with a lightweight way of managing and creating tables. So here we can see we've got our bakery.sdf. Remember, I told you this was this portable file-based database system we've got in here. And we can open up the products table. We can see the items we've got listed. We can go ahead and define what the table looks like, specify new columns, indexes, relationships, just like we would do in some of the other tools that we've seen before. Yes, sir?
Do you have an option to choose SQL Server or another database, or are you stuck with this?
No, you can connect to another database if you want to. Yeah. Oh, sorry. But the question was, are you stuck with this database, or can you use another one, like maybe SQL Express? But yes, you can. You can connect to any database you want. Under the hood, it's all ASP.NET. It's just an abstraction, so you can use similar code if you've been building web applications before in ASP.NET. We think, though, that most people are going to be happier just staying inside of the Web Matrix tool and using this approach to build databases. So that's why we provided kind of the basics here for getting started.
Would the tool not work with SQL Express, for example?
Not inside this particular IDE. So the question was, will this tool work with SQL Express to manage the database? And the answer is no. This is specifically for this type of file format, SDFs, which is the portable database file format for SQL Compact. If you wanted to do the management of a SQL Express, for example, then you would use SQL Management Studio. Great question. So that's the database portion of the site. If I browse over to Files, we'll see we've got a new file extension here, which you'll probably notice straight away. CSHTML is the new file format for ASP.NET web pages, which are is the flavor of ASP.NET that runs in Web Matrix. And you'll also start to see it in MVC3 because we share a similarity here when it comes to building web applications using the CSHTML format. If I drill into one of the pages, you'll see we've got everything in line. And we're doing things very simply. We have code denoted using the @ symbol, and then we have some open curly braces and curly closed braces here to indicate where we have code. So here we're just opening the database, we're doing a very simple query, and then we're using that data further down in the product list here. So we can see we're using @featured.name, @featured.description, and so the syntax here you can see is quite nice because it mixes code and markup very cleanly. Let's run this page and see what we get. We get an error. Interesting, okay. Okay, let's move on to a different demo. I want to show you now some of the helpers that are available inside of Web Matrix. So I mentioned that these are code shortcuts that make it really easy to add common functionality. So I'm going to go and open up Web Matrix again, and create a new site from template. Actually, what I'll do quickly, let me go grab this site from template. We'll do starter site. I'm going to run this. And I'm going to go to a special admin part of the website, which is going to allow me to manage the packages that are installed inside my web applications. Now, these are packages which help me to get started using the Web Matrix much more quickly. I can go and select online, and this is going to pull down a public feed, which is available on the internet, of all of these helpers. So I can see here we've got Facebook social plugins, we've got some Microsoft web helpers, which we've included out of the box, as well as a helper for OData and Windows Azure Storage. I'm going to go ahead and install the basic Microsoft Web Helpers package. Tells me that it's been successfully installed. Now, if I hop back into my starter site and I look at the files, and for some reason the network connectivity is not being very friendly. Okay. So what should happen is I get an assembly come down off of the feed, and it inserts it into the website. And then I can start to use code such as this. Twitter.search. And let's search for Innovate. And what that'll do will render a widget that Twitter have created to provide a search engine for all of the tweets. So we'll get back all of those particular tweets. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into this other project which I've got created here, and I'm going to pull down another template. So one thing we've done is provided that central list of helpers. But one of the other things we want to do is provide a rich set of an ecosystem of templates for people to enjoy, because those templates are going to get people about 10% of the way towards the solution, as I said. But really, what we're seeing is people get templates from design sites and download them for $60, $100, and that kind of thing. And that gets them to a nice design and able to create their website very quickly. Now, one of those sites that provide that capability is templatemonster.com. So they are one of the top sites here for acquiring templates, and they've got a large library of templates. So one of the things that we're working on with Template Monster is making it really easy to get their templates into WebMatrix. And let me show you a quick proof of concept, which we haven't rolled out publicly yet, but we will do in the near future, on how you can get that template into your website. Of course, we're going to go and buy our template with PayPal, and then it takes us to this download page here, and it gives us this feed. Now, I'm going to go and copy the feed, and I'm going to take it back into my website here. I'm going to run this page. There's nothing here yet. You notice how this is completely empty on the left-hand side. There's nothing inside of my website. I'm going to go to the admin administration again. I'm going to manage my feeds, and I'm going to add this new Template Monster feed. Now that's added. I can go back to Package Manager, click on Online, and then choose the Template Monster feed. And then that's going to give me my template that I've just purchased online for $60 from Template Monster. I'm going to click Install. I'm just going to confirm that. And then what it'll do is, behind the scenes, go and install all of the assets from the template and make them ready for me to use inside of WebMatrix. So if I return now to my website and refresh, you'll see I've got a bunch of new assets, pages, JavaScript, CSS, and images ready for me to go. So now when I run my site, I get a nice-looking website that's ready for me to customize. So if I wander over to my products page, one of the things that we've done in this particular template is, and if I zoom out a little bit, there we go, is we've already added in a bunch of helpers which we've included inside of WebMatrix. You'll notice we've got a like button here from the Facebook API. If I click on the product, we've got an Add to Cart button from the PayPal API that we're launching today, as well as commenting here so we can get customer feedback and reviews on our product. Let me show you the code behind this. If I go to the product page, we can see here that one simple line of code to add the commenting functionality is right here. It's at Facebook social plugins.comments, and instantly it renders out the comment widget, the comment social plugin for Facebook. Now, beyond the add to cart button, and the button manager APIs that we've included, we've also provided some adaptive payment APIs. So if you're aware of what the adaptive payment APIs, they provide some nice features that things like chain pay, etc., make it really easy to set up behind-the-scenes transactions. So in this particular example, I set up my store, which is receiving the full amount for the product, and I've actually created a supplier amount, which is 10% of the original price. And behind the scenes, what I can do is I can tell the chain payment API to go and split that payment out, and then behind the scenes pay the supplier for this particular product without the customer knowing. And so that's quite a nice feature if you want to pay people, suppliers, on the fly for the products that you're selling on your store. The main command here for calling that API is paypal.chainpay.execute, and then that'll return a response from the PayPal service. You take that response, you grab the pay key, as you're probably aware, and then append it to a URL. In this case, we're using the sandbox, and then we redirect the user down here to that URL, and then PayPal associates the transaction that you've registered with it with that particular pay key. How am I doing on time?
You are 4 minutes over.
4 minutes over. Okay. So let me just wrap up the demo. So what have you seen? Well, some of the things that we've included in WebMatrix, like the helpers, make it really easy to get started building commonly used functionality in your websites. And today, we've launched the PayPal helper, and we're going to show links at the end of the session on where you can go and download that. And so far, we've included the button manager and also the adaptive payment API. And now I'm going to hand over to Vittorio, who's going to talk to you about Platform as a Service. Now, one of the things you can do in WebMatrix is to publish to a normal host for $5 a month. Alternatively, you can now publish your websites into Azure. But Azure isn't just about hosting. There's a lot more to it. And Vittorio is going to talk to you about how Azure provides a great platform as a service. If I can get the Ethernet cable out. There you go.
Buongiorno, everybody. Thank you. It's customary that you give the buongiorno back. In these 15 minutes, if I manage to speak fast but still understandable, which may be a challenge given my Redmond accent, I will talk to you about another example of a collaboration between Microsoft and, you guessed, PayPal. And since this example is about the use of a cloud, I'm probably going to use a certain number of buzzwords. And after these 2 great days of conference, I am sure you are completely filled with buzzwords. So instead of just using them, I'd like to spend a few moments to actually create the context. And we'll see that it will be more context building than actually going through the demo. But before I go ahead, I would like to ask one brave person to give the definition of software as a service. Go ahead.
A multi-tenant solution that runs in a cloud and is consumable by multiple consumers.
A multi-tenant solution which runs in the cloud and can be consumed by multiple consumers. That is a very good definition. And
looks like you win a prize.
As a result, you win a handbook for breaking into things. All right. So that is actually a good definition. It is perhaps a tad too specific, so let me try to be more generic. Software as a service means having a product, having IP, having something that performs a certain business function, and instead of delivering it as a physical, almost physical asset which lives on the premises of a user, you have it somewhere and you offer access to it so that the user can perform the function, but they don't actually have to install anything. This is something which dates way back. Like now is cloud here, cloud there, but in reality, we've been talking about this at least for the last 6 years. Am I talking too fast?
No.
Perfect. I know that my accent sometimes gets out of control. So let's say that you have your IP and you have your application which lives somewhere. Let's say that your application performs some manual business tasks such as managing shipments or similar. When you sell it as a service, then what happens is that you kind of have like a factory, something which is able to use that as a template, but in reality create multiple versions of this app. So if, for example, you have a certain user here, which decide somehow to sign up, then you'll spawn a version of that application somehow customized for that specific user. And if you have other users with other needs, like guy with top hat, you'll create a slightly different version. And you get the point. Here, let me add a surfer. That's the same. Now, that's the business model, but how do you actually do it in practice? You can do it the old way, like every application is actually one instance running on a server somewhere which you created, or you could always use the same instance, for example here, and give to everybody the illusion that they are the only user. So there are different ways of doing that. And if you wanted to do this a few years ago, even just 3 years ago, well, it's not exactly trivial. So here, let me give a practical example of that. Now, and I would like you guys to write down that this is probably the first time in which you see one cloud slide in which there is not a single shade of blue. Also, there is not a cloud clip art, so at least I'm original. So let's say that this represents like the opportunities, the market. And let's say that you roam around the market and you are searching for a chance of actually expressing your idea. So let me actually chalk you down. Now, drawing under pressure is always difficult, but imagine you're here in your camel with your idea on the back. You have this fantastic business idea. Oops, I have to stay here, otherwise you don't hear me. And you want to implement it, like this fantastic business opportunity, you want to implement it as a service. Now, in a traditional world in which you use a packaged software, you have a long way to go, because you have to manage literally everything from the physics of a networking, making connectivity available, to the fact that you have to manage storage somewhere, which means machines and similar. You need to actually manage servers, which means having them physically in a room, you have to air condition, and the usual. Virtualization, because of course, nowadays you have multiple cores and similar, you want to slice and dice your assets without having to think of a physical server. You need to manage the operating system. If you are lucky, you use Windows. If you don't, well, I respect you. But now, of course, you know, I'm joking. And, of course, you have to patch it and similar. You need middleware, because you need, for example, if you want to set up a cluster, and you want, because if you want to have a lot of customers and make a lot of money, you need a lot of capacity. So you need the cluster. And then you need a runtime, because you need to write this stuff in some language. And finally, you get to the part which pertain your business idea, the data and the application, or more than one, in itself. So this thing is a kind of hard, in fact, can be intimidating. But a few years ago, we had this fantastic introduction, which was basically the hoster, or ASPs and similar. So you can actually take this stack of things and push it down inside the infrastructure. As a result, some of the things that you see under the sand are now responsibility of somebody else. It's not something that you need to worry about, because the hoster will air condition things, will manage the servers, will make sure that your storage infrastructure is there, they will worry about the network switches, and similar. However, it's still non-trivial to do the application, because even if you get a completely virtualized environment in which somebody, for example, and I can't give you a name here, give you pure virtual machines somewhere in the cloud, well, you still need to patch those machines. You own those machines, even if physically they are not in your premises. And also, you still need, if you needed to set up a cluster, to put the cluster software, to make sure that if one machine goes down, that you bring it up. All this kind of knowledge, which instead could actually be pushed farther in the platform. And that's exactly what happens with the cloud. Like, the cloud is a very generic term. Like, how many people are here in marketing? One and a half, of course, come on. But you know, you are a technical guy. But anyway, so I assume that we are all technical guys. We know that we need simple monikers for people to wrap their head around it. So cloud works really well. Also, you can visualize it, the cloud. And the platform as a service can be kind of scary. But in reality, that's what it is. That's platform as a service. As a result, now, when you need to create your application, you need to worry only about this. And finally, I get to my point. Now, the name that we give for our offering for the platform as a service is Windows Azure. Windows Azure is composed by substantially two pure capabilities. One is compute. This is a pure CPU power. In other words, you don't have to worry about maintaining a virtual machine, implementing patches and similar. We give you tools, both Visual Studio or Eclipse, if you prefer, which package the logic of your application in a form that can be used by our infrastructure. And then once you publish it, we just take care of that. And we take care of managing the health of the system, of if one instance goes down, to bring it up or switch it with the right one, and similar. We do the same with storage, in which we give you unstructured NoSQL storage, so that you can upload whatever you want, and depending on the use that you want to do, we actually give you also further services. For example, if you're publishing content, and you need, for example, to make it available in Asia, because there is a certain event, we have mechanisms for pushing these and caching it in the right geographies and similar. Then we have SQL Azure, which is instead an actual relational database in the cloud. As a developer, you just have a connection string. You use that connection string for doing whatever you want. Behind the scenes, we keep 3 copies of the same database, one in one data center, one in another, so that if something happens to one, we are able to bring it up and at the same time, so you don't have to worry about any of those details. And we have many other similar services, slightly higher level, such as, for example, the access control service, which helps you to do things like managing your relationship, managing federation, and similar things. Now, one of my goals in my current position in Microsoft is to help developers to use our platform. And so I decided to step and make a few miles, more than one, in the shoes of our customers. And I took one existing application that we had, one example, and I made the exercise of moving it in the cloud and make it from an on-premise based application to a software as a service. And the result is this Fabricam shipping thing, which is the code name that we use. And it's a live demo that it's available on the internet. You can just go to www.fabricamshipping.com. You can play with it. You can see how this software as a service thing works. You can even download the code so that you can look at how we did that. And basically what we do is actually using this infrastructure for a new breed of applications. Instead of a classic free tier or service-oriented and similar, here we actually use these just like if it would be an operating system. Operating system protects you from the details of a machine. Windows Azure and Platform as a Service protects you from the details of distributed systems. So we hide all the details of keeping things alive and similar. For you, it's just pure capability. So for this application, we created one store which managed the subscriptions. We created some UI which runs in the CPU part for onboarding customers, which I'm promptly adding to the picture. And once the customer goes through a certain experience, then at that point, we have one, how to say, long-running process, which is actually able to orchestrate all those capabilities, such as, for example, adding new federation relationships, adding new databases just for that part, and spawning instances, or adding to one if you are using multi-tenant. Multi-tenant is one specific style of software as a service, or creating completely isolated ones if you want more than one. And here, finally, PayPal comes into play. No example of software as a service is complete without the payment, because in the end, the reason for which you go through all of this land is you want the customer to cough the money. And we did all these, a complete sample which showed all these little miracles, like packaging, creating stuff on the fly, and using multiple identity providers. Awesome. But the payment, we need the payment. And so I had the luck to meet with a couple of guys that I know at PayPal at one conference a couple of months ago, and they gave me the numbers of our good friend Shah here and Praveen, which were extremely helpful in integrating the PayPal adaptive APIs in our sample. And that's pretty much what we have done. Now, if you can actually walk through the sample and have a feeling of how to use those APIs in a very, very seamless fashion. And that's precisely what I'm going to do. So here I will give you a super fast sample because, you know, it's late. So if you go to not Facebook, it's inappropriate from the stage. If you go to this address, you will actually be able to do this thing yourself in the privacy of your home. Here instead, I will just give you a very quick example. So here there is the basic UI of the flow. Let's say that I want to create one subscription as a small business owner. And today I will be Adam Carter. And the experience is very straightforward. I just get to fill in a short questionnaire, let's say, like, for example, the name of my company, my contact, and similar, which I want to do because I am challenged. I am a hunt and peck despite 15 years in the industry. So I have a form filler which does that for me. So if things happen too fast, that's why. So here I have my company name and my contact. Here I can add the list of my users. You may notice that I am actually not adding any username and password because my system leverages or Live ID or Google ID, and I could leverage whatever I want. And I'm not going to show it because we don't have time, but if you want to see that, again, go to the sample and play with that. And then finally, we get to the last step, in which we can actually play with the payment possibility. And here I have two ways of leveraging the APIs. I can do the pay month by month, in which I could just use a generic credit card once in a while, or I can actually give the pre-approval. In the pre-approval, I give my consent to pay for a certain amount of time, and the token that comes out of this will be saved by the machinery of a sample somewhere, and then at a regular basis, we will use that token for charging the user. So let's try to use these. So if I hit subscribe, the system redirects me to PayPal, as you can see here, and the sandbox. Here I will sign in as my user, and I will be prompted to give consent for paying. This is all standard stuff. I approve. And magic. We successfully signed up for pre-approved. And at this point, we'll just be redirected back to the system. Behind the scenes, we actually sent the prepayment token. We used the APIs for querying the backend and making sure that everything worked as expected, and that's it. So now, from now on, I could actually show you the rest of the demo, but it doesn't have any specific PayPal parts. And I'm also kind of like, I don't know if it's the case of showing you the code, because this code is now embedded as a part of our infrastructure. So here we have a wrapper which substantially takes the PayPal APIs and integrates it in our provisioning process. So this is just one of the commands of our workflow, together with things like create a new database, insert a new federation relationship, or allocate a new room for this part. We also make the payment. If you are interested, I invite you to actually take a look at the code and download it. That said, let me wrap up. Yes. So those are the touch points which you may have guessed from the functionality we implemented. And with what James has shown about the web matrix and the part that you just endured now, and thank you for that, about the Windows Azure and the cloud, you have seen just two examples of how our platform can touch the PayPal APIs and how we can augment each other. And I'm almost hating myself for saying that because it's very marketing, but we can actually achieve synergy. And if tomorrow you say Dilbert strip with my long face, you know why. So choose the model that you prefer. You want to build the websites directly, you want to start from scratch, you want to use a template, you want to use a service, absolutely, we got you covered. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we are streaming our Premier Developer Conference. So if you want to hear announcements that have to do with this, just point your browser to player.microsoft.com and we'll stream all that. If you don't like English, you can listen to it in other 4 different languages because it's translated on the fly. I just think it's really cool. And if you want to do more, you can go to the sample, as you have seen in there, or you can download the helpers that James demonstrated at his website. And if you just cannot get enough of a British or strongly Italian accent, you can follow us at our blogs, or we have Twitter. He is very prolific. I'm a lazy Twitterer, but, you know. And that said, I would open the floor for questions.
Question here.
Yep. And come and influence the Microsoft.
So if I have a Azure, is that how you say it, Azure? Application, and I want to add a plugin for Web Matrix, how would I go about doing that?
So if you have an existing
Azure app.
So chances are that you've you've written your web application for Azure in MVC, perhaps?
Yes.
MVC.
It is an MVC. Yeah.
Right. So when I mentioned before how we have some similarities between the new version of MVC, version 3, which is currently in beta, and what you've seen with Web Matrix, the language and the syntax is very similar with the new Razor View engine that we have in MVC. So my recommendation would be to, if you wanted to use Web Matrix instead of Visual Studio, which is kind of a backwards way of kind of the opposite of where we would normally progress, but if you did want to use that tool, then you could grab the code out, change the controllers into inline code instead, and then publish out to Windows Azure.
Or another way, would they be able to incorporate the plugins that you offered into Azure directly?
I'll ask that again, sorry?
Into my Azure application, is there any way to do it?
The plugins and the helpers?
Yeah, into Azure.
Yes, that's correct. So if you have an MVC3 application...
I have two right now, so I have to upgrade.
Right. So then you can use the helpers that we've created for PayPal to make it easier.
So just do it manually?
Inside of MVC3 as well. So you can use helpers in both Web Matrix and also MVC3.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So one thing I didn't get to show was the big publish button. So behind the big publish button, what you get is the ability to select one of our free hosts that we partnered with, and we've got a bunch of them out there. You can sign up for a free account, and they provide hosting for you. And the alternative is to publish out to Windows Azure. There's some few things that you need to do, and there's a blog post out there on how to do it, but you can do the same thing. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
With the Azure platform, the data is with you. So what's the guarantee that data wouldn't be compromised?
I'm sorry, you should really almost eat the Microsoft because we can't hear.
The data of the vendor is with the Azure platform in the database. So what's the guarantee that data wouldn't be compromised? The database is managed by you guys, right? Because
I guess the question is that with the Azure platform, you have the data, control of the data. Microsoft has the control of the data. How do you guarantee the security of that data?
Thank you. So the question was, Microsoft has the data at Death Star, and so how do we ensure that those data are in good health or security? Well, we have a good paper about that, and I invite you to use your search engine of choice for picking the keywords Windows Azure Security White Paper. And within the 10 results, regardless of the machine that you use, which I really don't want to know, you will find one link to this paper which walks you in painstakingly low details about how we ensure that your data are safe. Also, if you have a specific geographic concerns, like, for example, in Europe, there are certain laws and regulations about where data should be residing. When you create your Windows Azure project, you are absolutely free to specify which data center in which geography will be used for that specific function. So we also give you this further step.
Good question. Another one here.
So that local database you showed in Web Matrix, is it also available in Azure?
Yes.
And so, but is there an
just
easy way to add it in Azure, in Visual Studio?
So once the data's up there in the cloud, so to speak, how do you edit it, administrate the database, or change the database, tables, and things like that?
Right, is it an API in the code? Or?
No, right now you would, when I mentioned that you can do incremental updates to your site, you would have to manage the changes locally and then resynchronize them. So you would have to get the data out and then kind of merge it back in.
So there's no real-time?
There's no kind of tooling that provides that right now.
There's no API?
No API right now. Good question. We are working on that scenario, though.
So there's no way to deploy any compact database into Azure?
There's
no way to deploy your own little compact SQL database into Azure.
Well, so if we get on the Windows Azure side, sorry, let me step into the spotlight. In Windows Azure, you can have a number of things, such as if you have your SQL relational database, you can just go on SQL Azure, use classic SQL commands, and just put that in there. Like you don't have a SQL compact because every time you put something in SQL Azure, you get triple redundancy. You have a different, like that's very solid.
But it's,
however, if your data are non-structured, if your data are flat, no SQL and similar, you can use the Windows Azure storage, which instead is significantly cheaper and is extremely easy to put stuff in and out. We have REST APIs, so whatever platform of choice you want to use for moving this data in and out, it's absolutely trivial. So the fact that locally you keep that in a SQL compact does not entail that you have to have a corresponding technology on the cloud.
I understand. SQL Server, the Azure SQL is pretty expensive, and I personally need a small subset where I need SQL functionality,
right?
But not, and the rest of it could be in storage, Azure storage.
Yep.
But it would be useful to have a compact, small scale, under 1 gig, just like you have, compact SQL server that could be deployed into Azure.
We can get it offline because, of course, here we get into the design. Like, if it's small, do you really need a relational? So, but we can get it offline because I don't want everybody to dislocate their jaw.
Okay, I think
and
we're out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be hanging out in the corridor if you have any more questions.